Well, our session was exactly on that topic. It was on institutional RFPs and finals presentations, preparation and execution. And the reason why that content was offered here is because amongst this crowd of advisors, which cover the entire swath of the industry, there are many who specialize in or have some clients or would desire to specialize in the institutional consulting space, either working with endowments and foundations, pension plans, public funds, or other types of institutions. So the first step in ultimately acquiring an institutional client is going through an RFP process, and prior to that even having a lead that generates an opportunity for you to participate in the RFP exercise. And Mark Fisher of Fisher Consulting Group focused on that portion of the exercise, and then my portion of the presentation focused on what happens once you get to the actual finals. But if I could summarize a couple of the key points that he made around RFPs, a big part of what determines success ultimately is pre-qualifying. And that means there are probably more cases that may come across your opportunity desk that you may choose to pass on than ones you actually ultimately invest the time to do the RFP. And one of your most valuable tools in that exercise is the question why. So when you receive an RFP, it's really important to spend the time before you invest 30, 40, or 60 hours of your team's time responding to an extensive questionnaire and submitting it to determine whether or not it's an opportunity you actually have a viable shot at, what is the proper connection, and are they actually going to make a change at the plan. So imagine that you are successful, that you decide to advance, you invest the time in the RFP process, you are successful in being invited to the finals presentation. Now you're heavily invested and you have a whole nother set of considerations in order to try and make the most of that opportunity. And one of the things that I'd like to stress is that subtlety and nuances are really important at that stage, because you are, while pre-qualified into a short list of finalists, you're coming into a setting where you are going to be making a first impression with the trustees who will ultimately decide the fate of who is chosen for this mandate. And so a couple things around that I would keep in mind is that in most of these situations, there will be a door that opens into a room of trustees, and they are likely sitting around a table, and you are coming in, and it's very beneficial if you take a moment before you walk through that door and you put yourself on the other side of that wall and picture what's about to come through the door. And oftentimes we'll come through the door with a FedEx box full of presentation materials and a handbag, and our posture's off, and that's the first impression that we make, and we set those things down, and maybe we go and shake hands, maybe we hand out business cards. But if instead we were to think about how we appear, good posture, positive, warm smile, and a display of confidence would serve us well. Secondly, once we're in that room, one of the important things to keep in mind is having sight line to the decision makers. If you have any ability to control the seating arrangement in a finals presentation, you want to influence that, because it would be awkward to be on the side of a very long boardroom style table, for example, surrounded by trustees, and to have the chairman of the investment committee or whoever the key decision maker is sitting 3 people down, and you have no sight lines to them. So you want to hopefully be able to arrange seating. I had the opportunity last Tuesday to participate in a finals presentation with a colleague, and we entered a similar situation, except in this case there were 2 open chairs and probably a dozen chairs filled. One was open at the end of the table, directly opposite the chairman of the investment committee, and one on the side. So as we approached our chairs to sit down, we grabbed the second chair and just wheeled it around so that my colleague and I were sitting next to one another, showing no difference in balance of power, and both having direct sightline to the decision maker, so that when we spoke, we were connecting directly with the audience. Well, it's an interesting thought, because the investment world does continue to get more complex. Regulatory issues become more and more prominent, and regulatory scrutiny as a result higher than it has been in the past, and that will probably continue. And the sophistication of boards and committees, commensurate with a increased transparency of investment information, thanks to technology, only raises the bar on a constant basis. So it makes it imperative for all of us to always stay as sharp as we can and use the tools that are available to us to make as good of an impression and put our best foot forward and show the the end trustee that we're the undeniable best solution to help them with their investment portfolio. We should talk more about preparation for a moment. It is probably one of the least consistently applied principles in finals presentations and arguably one of the most important. It's really valuable to remember that if you are in a finals presentation, you are a viable option. And often what we find, and studies show, that firms that are not selected for the mandate, often it's not because they didn't win, it's because they failed. And you don't want to be the one failing. So I had the benefit of being involved in a finals presentation several years ago with some former colleagues who invited me to participate. And in that particular meeting, they were adamant that they wanted the 3 people from the institutional consulting team, the alternative specialist from home office, and me, also from home office, to all present to the committee members, and there were only 20 minutes to present. And I told them in advance that this was a terrible idea, it was doomed to fail, and consequently they insisted, and the day of the meeting, I expected, as the last presenter of 5, with a target of 4 minutes, to have -7 by the time it came to me, and what in fact happened was the head of the team kicked it off and discussed the importance of the client relationship to the team. The functional head of the team talked about how the team operates, the resources of the team, and how they were a great solution for this client, how they would benefit the plan. The head of the investment engine for the team spoke about how they conduct research on managers. The alternative specialist spoke broadly about the landscape around alternatives and why that was an important part of portfolio construction. And it was handed to me with 3.5 minutes left. And when I approached the head of the team later, in disbelief that I'd been proven wrong, that this actually could be done and done well, I asked him how they did that, and he said, we practiced. And when I challenged him on what he meant by that, I said, tell me more. He said, well, I took the kitchen timer off the stove at home, and I brought it in, I put it on my desk, and the 3 of us from the team practiced our parts and timed it. And when it was too long, we did it again, and too long, we did it again, and we did it again until we got it right. And I asked him how many times? 30 times. Prepare, and prepare some more.